Arfield, what a bully! Scott Arfield! He's been threatening that recently, and all the Burnley players run to the Darwin end.
Burnley win the next ball. It's Rory now. It's on the outside. Decent.
Barnes! He got it! Ashley Barnes with it! What a cross from Rory! And there was Ashley Barnes! And Burnley leading the derby.
Knocks it quickly. Finds Benson in space at the byline. Can Burnley get a goal here? Back for Brownell. Saved by the keeper!
Burnley won it to the end! That is magnificent! They deserve that!
On it by Paul Teller. Off for a hat-trick.
He's got it! Hat-trick for Nathan Teller! Oh, he's on fire at the minute! 3-0 Burnley! It's Nathan Teller's day! And Burnley are 3 up here. Fantastic derby!
Here's Benson. Can he go on the outside? Comes inside. Top shot.
Oh, the goal! Manuel Benson once more! That is top class! Burnley have done it! Fantastic! Clarets deserve the championship title. They've been the best side throughout the campaign. Burnley have won the second tier. What a fantastic achievement. The players have been magnificent.
Yes, hello everyone and welcome along to the latest instalment of the Turfcast podcast pre-game show with me, Joe Redmond, ahead of Burnley's game against Luton Town, Saturday, 3 o'clock at Turf Moor, our first Saturday 3 o'clock game at the Turf since the 21st of December when, funnily enough, we played Watford and won 2-1. And yeah, sorry about that, Phil. I immediately throwing you to infuriate you there. But as you can see, you may recognise him from earlier in the season. I think you did it, didn't you, Phil?
You did indeed, yeah.
Yeah, it was you, yeah, wasn't it? But yeah, I've got Phil from the OK Football Show. How you doing, mate?
Yeah, I'm okay, mate. I'm trying to keep a brave face. It's been a bit of a difficult season so far. We were discussing on my end of the show that it's our seasons have gone in very separate directions, and probably mainly indicated by that first game of the season from when we last spoke.
Yeah, so let's get into it then, mate, because I genuinely like to ask people that the first question I like to ask people is, talk to me about your season so far. However, I'm going to rephrase it for you and say, what the hell has gone on, mate?
I've spent months now trying to put my finger on it, and what I've put it down to, and I think most Luton fans would tend to agree. I think it's been a bit of a toxic sort of situation this year with the fan base, and obviously double relegation sort of on the cards as it stands at the minute. But I think that there's a real deep sense of rot that's set into the squad, and when you look at the likes of yourselves, Sheffield United, that came down with us last season, there was a natural turnover of players, whereas we lost arguably two of our best players. In the obvious one being Ross Barkley. We lost Sambi Lokonga. We lost Kabore to a lesser extent. But what you realise when they're gone is just how pivotal they were and how shot for confidence the rest of the team are. I mean, when you go through our lineup, you've still got most of the players there that were there from last season. So the strike force of Adebayo and Morris, they're struggling. They try to be effective in their own ways, but Adebayo's confidence is absolutely at the lowest I've ever seen it as a Luton player. And then you've got the likes of I say the likes of Doughty was out for a long part of the season, which was a huge loss for us because he takes all the set pieces, and that's been mainly the way that we score goals. There's a terrible stat, and I think that we've scored 13, maybe now 14 goals from open play in the entire season. Now, that shows how heavily reliant we are on set pieces and just how poor we are from open play. And that's because of that lack of invention. And again, like I say, I think that the way that we played last year with Barkley is that absolute middle pivot, the absolute kingpin of the team. He made decisions that made it easier for the other players to play. So, whereas what I've found this year is that our centre midfield, they give the ball out wide to the likes of Doughty or whoever's playing on the other side as a wing back, but they're getting the ball 30 yards deeper than what they were last year because they haven't had Barkley breaking through the lines to put it across from 30 or 40 yards out. They're putting it even further back, in terms of and expecting Morris or Adebayo to get on a cross where the angle isn't quite right. There's no getting to the byline and whipping one in and being able to use their physicality as much. So that's one thing. That's one of like theory in regards to how difficult it's been. We obviously lost Rob Edwards at the start of this year, and we've replaced him with Matt Bloomfield, which again, mixed opinions in the fan base. I think that there's a few people that like the fact that he's a young sort of up and coming manager, and he fits into that similar ethos as we've had with our last few appointments. But then there's a lot of people that think that he's Rob Edwards Mark II, and it's not really changed anything. So and truth be told, results wise, it hasn't. I think that it could be argued that out of all of the teams at the bottom that have made a managerial change, ours has been the one that's taken the longest to have any effect at all. That was his first win at the weekend. So we'd had a couple of draws, but truth be told, it's just not clicked from the word go. The confidence is shot. Our style of play has been sort of found out and negated by many teams. And truth be told, when we've beaten teams, we've not actually looked very good for it. That's the real crux of it, is that I could sit here today, Joe, and tell you on one hand how many times we've played well. And this isn't me trying to get one over on our local rivals, as you saw my face earlier on. But when we beat Watford, that was a solid 90 minutes of playing well. We played a good half of football against Sunderland at home, and they still turned us over. We played a good half of football against Sheffield United and still got turned over. We're yet really play well away from home, which obviously going away to Turf Moor, very there's a huge amount of trepidation in how I think that the weekend's going to go. So yeah, it's been looking better slightly under Bloomfield. It's starting to look a bit more cohesive, and we've made a couple of the January signings start playing now, which has made us look slightly better. But ultimately, it's been a real struggle, and I know that I've spoken for quite some time. I apologise, Joe. I obviously did have an answer in the end.
It was quite an open question, to be fair.
But yeah, it is difficult to actually pinpoint one exact thing. It's just been a bit of a shower, to be honest.
Yeah, well, let's look at the missing players, because I remember, and in no way, shape, or form should the people I'm about to mention be ever lauded as the people that the fountain of all knowledge. But I remember at the start of the season, the Second Tier podcast had you as winning the league. I remember personally thinking, I'm not sure about that. I think they might finish 7th or 8th or maybe sneak into the playoffs, because Bartley's going to be a massive miss. That was my thinking, because I knew how good he was in that Premier League season. But not relegation. Like, in no way, shape, or form did I feel like you would be in the trouble that you are in now. Yes, you've lost players, but just quickly getting your last team up from your win against Portsmouth. You've still got Kaminski, who, as hilarious as it is that Ashley Barnes threw him in the net when we played against Blackburn and we won 3-0, still a good goalkeeper at this level. You've got Morris, who's a decent centre forward at this level. You obviously got Alfie Dougherty, who I always thought was left back, but on this seems to be a little bit further forward. A left-sided player anyway. A brilliant player, put it that way. Asgard as well, he's another player that I rate. These players should not have you down third bottom in the Championship. So I know you've already said there's a lot to pinpoint, but you did lose players. But I still feel like this squad is good enough to be, at the very minimum, a mid-table Championship team, and that's being harsh.
I think you're right. I think that when you look at each individual player, you could make that argument and feel like it's quite a sound argument. What I've found from watching them as much as I have this season is that especially the midfield has been so heavily bypassed. We've become a long ball team very, very quickly. And those games that I mentioned to you earlier on about where we've played well, that's where we've actually had the confidence and probably been given an absolute rollicking at half times in particular, and said, play the ball on the floor, have some confidence. You are good players. But too often we rely on going up to Morris in particular. And truth be told, the ball used to stick to Morris without a problem. But the thing is, people have realised that if you're going to play against Carlton Morris, you need to get one in front and one behind him and double up on him. Because if you negate that way of playing, Luton haven't got a lot else. Now, in January, we have tried to make some key signings. I think that when you consider, so I'm sure that you're like, I'm also looking at the sort of the lineup from Saturday, and you're right. Alfie Doughty was playing more as a left wing back, so he sort of dropped into a 4 when he needed to, but he had Bell behind him as a naturally left-sided player. But our back three there, at least 2 of them would have probably been Mengi, Osho, Lockyer, from last season. Obviously, we've still got Mengi. We've technically still got Lockyer. The loss of Osho is massively underrated, because I'm not saying that he set the Premier League alight, but when you watch Luton week in, week out, when he was playing, he's a ball player. And I said earlier on about Barkley and the fact that he can carry the ball forwards and he can be progressive. That's what we've got now with having Cal Naismith back. And as much as he's an older player now and he's not necessarily in his prime, his footballing brain is there. And it's not a case of dump it up. If he can get the ball down on the floor and like I say, gain 5-6 yards before playing the right pass, he will do. We've got a very raw, very young player in Kroos Makoso, he's played 135 minutes. He played a half against Watford, made his debut in the second half when we were already 2-0 down. But he had arguably a man of the match performance against Portsmouth. And he's just to give you an expectation as to what he's like, Joe, because I doubt you've seen much of him at all, if any.
I've never heard of him. I'll be honest with you, I've never heard of him.
Exactly. There you go. He's an athlete. He's an athlete. Yeah. He outran Murphy from Pompey at the weekend. Now, Murphy's fast, and Makoso looked like he had another gear, and he was almost sort of toying with some of their fast players because he's just a long, very athletic bloke. But if you give him the football, I'm not entirely convinced that he's going to be particularly successful in picking out our man rather than one of yours. He's a defender at best. But moving forward, we've then gone into the market and we've bought Asgard, like you said, to try and be a creative player in the midfield when we do play. And we've also got Izzy Jones, who we bought from Middlesbrough, who in my opinion has been the best signing that we've made all season. He's remarkably quick. And if he can get past that man first, he can. We spoke earlier on my podcast about how good Marcus Edwards is. I'm not saying he's in the same category, but he's similar in terms of he's a ball carrier. He's a very good dribbler. Like he's got real quality. So if we can look to utilize him as best as we possibly can, he could be, if anything, he could be the key for us making a chance whilst we're away from home up at your place.
Yeah, fair enough. I know you've touched on it very briefly, but Bloomfield, outside looking in, you said you feel like it is better under him. Outside looking in, I was surprised when you said that because I did have a brief look at it quickly, but I'll just quickly get it up on my screen again. I think he was appointed mid-January, around the 14th, I think it was. So since then, you've drawn at home to Preston, lost to Oxford, lost against Millwall, drawn against Sheffield Wednesday, lost to Sunderland, lost to Sheffield United, drew against Plymouth, another poor result, really, when you're down there and need wins, lost 2-0 against Watford, and obviously the one game you guys don't want to lose is against them, but did get a win last time out. I'm looking at them results and thinking, that can't be any better. That cannot be any better than Edwards. So what is it? Results don't look better, admittedly. No. There must be something on there for you to say earlier that it is a bit better.
I think the thing was that there was there when Rob Edwards was there, it just felt like we were falling off of a cliff. It was one of those. I think I take your point. Results wise, it hasn't gone well, and like I say, we've waited a long time for that first win, but the way that it was going with Rob Edwards, it was becoming toxic. as well. It was being at Kenilworth Road, which at the best of times is tight, you know, and that we hadn't heard any songs about Rob Edwards, and we hadn't really had much time to sort of like we became renowned last year. Some people think it was pathetic, but I at being one of those guys that was part of it, I was so proud about the fact that Luton Town were in the Premier League last year that we clapped off our players. I was proud that we were even where we were, and some people might call that tin pot, but the reality of it is that when you've been on the journey we've been on, you appreciate what you're doing when you're going to these mega stadiums, you know. And it started off in the season where we were like still clapping the guys off and still having a bit of a sing song about Rob Edwards. But the more the season's gone on and the more the expectation has changed for the club, and the expectation has gone from the start of the season thinking, yep, let's make a promotion push, whether that's via the playoffs or not, to well, mid-table, let's just sort of solidify our position in the league whilst we've got other stuff going on in the background from a logistical point of view about the stadium, etc. To oh, actually, we're in a bit of trouble here. And it just felt like we around November was a crux point for us. We got absolutely hammered up at Borough. I think it was 5-1 that we got hammered up at Borough. And the post-match press conference that Rob Edwards gave, it was very much like, thanks, I've had a great time, but I can't do this anymore. And then we had the international break, and everyone universally, I would argue, was pretty much saying, this is it. We're very thankful. We love you for what you brought us, but it is time to go. And then it carried on, as you say, until mid-January. And those results through there, that sort of gap between the international break and over the Christmas period and into January, the way we were playing was just awful. It was so bad to watch. It just felt hopeless. And that's the thing. I think that's probably when I think about the wording of what I've just said to you there, it felt hopeless. And I think that's where there's the difference with Bloomfield, because like you are absolutely spot on. You've got the facts and figures in front of you. The results haven't improved, but there's an element of hope because of the fact that we've got a few players that, like I say, seem to be understanding of what it means to be a Luton player, i.e. Cal Naismith. I think that he should be captain straight away, coming back in. And we've got a few players that, like I say, play with a bit of a smile on their face. So I'm hopeful in a weird way. You obviously will want to get a victory regardless, but I watched Izzy Jones against Watford, and he was a breath of fresh air. He plays with a smile on his face, and that might seem a bit weird because you're losing to your local rivals and the fans want you to be angry. But I also enjoy a good footballer when I see one. And if he's playing with a smile on his face, he's going to be playing well, you know. So I just think that like I say, it felt so doom and gloom and so much like it was a foregone conclusion at the back end of Rob Edwards' tenure, that regardless of whether or not it was the right, I personally wanted someone like Steve Cooper. Being really upfront with you, just to be absolutely clear, I was not particularly pleased about it being Matt Bloomfield, and I think that from his point of view, he should have taken the gamble and stayed with Wickham to get into the Championship rather than us. But ultimately, I'm guessing it's a case of money talks. I'm guessing that he had a clause in his contract where he's allowed to speak to us. Was probably told we're going to do as much as we can in the back end of the January transfer window to give you a few players that you want, and let's see how you get on. But we spoke again, like I say, on the flip side of things, we spoke about what it would be like for Scott Parker if you do or don't go up. I think from our point of view, there's a real lack of knowing what's going to happen if we go down. Do we stick with Matt Bloomfield, knowing that he's been in League One recently and done so well with Wickham? Yeah. But do you want that guy to be running your squad when he's had tantamount to half a season? So it's a weird situation, and it's like I say, the whole situation for Luton Town this year has been one where I can't figure it out, and it's just a sad situation considering how hard we work to get up into the positions where we've been in the last few seasons.
Yeah, just going back on a couple of points you made then that I do want to ask you about. First of all, I just want to say that I think a lot of Burnley fans, you were saying that you were clapping your team off because you were very, very happy that you're in the Premier League. I think a lot of Burnley fans can relate to that, because I remember in 2009 when we first got promoted, we'd been on a journey as well, not quite as dramatic as yours. We didn't fall as far as you. We nearly did in 1987. We nearly went out of the league. Obviously won on the final day. But we did eventually. It took us 20 odd years, but we did eventually get to the more than that. Actually, quite a lot of time. I don't know. My maths is terrible, but it took us a very long time to get to the. And I was when I started watching Burnley. Well, when I was born, Burnley were in what is now League Two, and I watched them slowly crawl up the leagues. And I remember losing 4-0 at Anfield and clapping Burnley off the pitch and I'm surprised we're even here. That's all I'm bothered about. So I completely respect that. And another point you said, Edwards came into a press conference after losing 5-1 at Middlesbrough and basically said, "Sack me, please." Why was he not sacked? Like, what happened there? I mean, my first question was going to be, why didn't he resign? Probably because he wanted the compensation. So that'd be a silly question. But then why wasn't he sacked then? Is it just ineptitude from the board, do you think?
Yeah. I know. I paused for a little while there, but no. But I think if you were to Luton Town fans, obviously, I'm not expecting you guys to have looked at, but the program notes this week from Gary Sweet, our sort of chair of the directors, he was almost apologetic and embarrassed by how the season's gone. I think that he recognizes that as a club they've taken their eye off the ball. I think that there's so much going on. I think that they couldn't believe their luck that they were basically going to get a free football stadium rather than having to fund it ourselves, because the plans were already there, by the way, Joe. It's not a case of, oh great, because we've gone up to the Premier League we'll buy a new stadium. Like all the stuff was in place, ready to go. It just happens to be that having this windfall of money means that it can be done on the cheap sort of thing, and hopefully quick fast, and I think that there's been a lot of progress with the situation around the stadium in the last few months, and there's been various different sort of council meetings and it's been agreed to be a 25,000 seater. But again, that to me is a real source of worry, because that's potential embarrassment, because our attendance is around about 11,000 each week at the moment. Obviously, if you're in the Premier League, you could sell that out double. People will follow the glory, But
I mean, look at Brentford. Obviously they were a club of a similar size, and they built a bigger stadium in their Philip. But
but
League
like I
One's
said,
a different ball game.
Exactly. We're on the downward trend at the moment rather than an upward one. So that's a sort of source of potential embarrassment. But ultimately, I think that there was an eye off the ball. I think it was a case of, Rob Edwards is good. He signed a new contract at the start of the season. We're elated to have him. Let's just trust him to the football and get on with our own stuff. We'll turn up on a Saturday. We'll do our program notes. We'll cheer on the team. But Rob's got it sorted. And I think that when they didn't sack him, I think that there's an element of Rob Edwards being a nice guy. I think that he's obviously he conducted himself in the Premier League absolutely superbly in terms of how he dealt with the situation around Tom Lockyer, and how he sort of tried to change the way that we played football. There's a lot of credit that Rob Edwards had in the bank for the way that he made us look like at one stage in the league last year we could have actually miraculously stayed up. Little Luton Town that are going to break Derby County's record.
You were much better than us.
So, and this is the thing, we had a chance to, that there was a time when it was quite exciting, thinking we could actually stay up. We could scrape our way above Everton, who were sort of in turmoil, and potentially drag another two in. But it didn't obviously happen. And I think that there's that naivety of just floating on by. And thinking that things are okay. I think that there's an element of not wanting to put your hand in your pockets, because he's got a brand new contract and he signed a quite long-term contract. And I think that they felt like if it's not a mutual agreement, we're going to end up paying through the nose for him. But there's still an element of that around Bloomfield's appointment. His sort of buyout clause from Wickham was pennies for a championship. It was like 100 grand. Like it feels like even though they said, oh yeah, we've done a thorough sort of data collection and this, that, or the other, but it happens to be a guy that cost 100 grand and he's 30 miles down the road. It's quite convenient. There's a little bit of a little bit of a feeling of that's not all that it might seem. But I think, apathy, taking the eye off the ball, not wanting to pay some money, and ultimately look at where we are now. We're suffered.
Yeah, you really, really have. Moving on then and focusing more on the game than Luton and your plight this season. Are there any particular players that Burnley fans should look out for that Luton might be able to hurt the league's best defence with?
Yeah, I think that like I mentioned him earlier on, but I think that like Izzy Jones is potentially the one that's going to be in open play at least. He's going to be the one that's potentially got the pace and the skill to get by someone. He plays on the right hand side for us. We've recently gone back to playing like a 3-5-2 or a 5-3-2, and I know that you mentioned about Perez being over on that
you probably just seen me
side.
wince then. As soon as you said
Yeah,
right hand side, then I'm like,
yeah.
I've literally just wrote down Perez and put it in a square immediately. Then in a mood.
Yeah, you mentioned it earlier on. I was like, I'm going to keep this one up my sleeve for later on. But
I'll text Scott now.
but yeah, so he's been quite exciting. I think that
is a shame.
I mean, it's one of those ones where output though is very different. So he looks like he can do incredible things, but ultimately it hasn't resulted in goals and assists quite yet.
Yeah, probably similar to Koleosho for this season at least.
Yeah, like I say, very similar ilk in terms of like being exciting, being quick, being a good dribbler. And like I say, he plays with a smile on his face. So I think that in open play, if we can get him further up the pitch and looking at him to isolate the likes of Perez, then hopefully that can be a source of success for us. In terms of how we typically score a goal, being really brutally honest with you, it tends to be from a set piece. So we've obviously got Doughty that's back in the team. We've got Walsh that can put in a good ball from the other side as a naturally right-footed player, and we've got people to aim for. You know, we do have the likes of Carlton Morris, who's strong in the air. We might see a return of Mark McGuinness this week. He came back on the pitch last week against Pompey, and truth be told, as much as he gets a bit of a bad rap throughout the course of the season, he's been our strongest defender. I think that the way that he's summarised is probably skewed a little bit by how much he cost as a Luton Town player. Like the amount that he costs absolutely smashed sort of our previous transfer record. I think it's like 6 million rising to potentially 10, which like I say, for us is a huge investment. And at times he's cost us a little bit. He seems to be maybe a yard or two behind the final man at times. Sometimes when he was playing with Ted and Mengi at the start of the season, he was going to attack balls that were already being attacked by Mengi. So he's had a bit of a tough opening season for us. But like I say, look at the league, look at where we are. We've been so heavily dominated in terms of possession, the way that we've been beaten by so many times, that he's been busy. And when you're exposed, you tend to get found out and you get put under the microscope a bit more. So that being said, going forward, he's an absolute lump of a guy, and he scored a few goals for us. So he could be an outlet for us to cause you potential problems. But ultimately, it's going to be hard work. We don't score many goals, especially away from home. And then when you couple that with the strength of your defence, I wouldn't be surprised if our XG is very, very low this week.
Might be too low XGs then on the pitch, but ultimately the only stat that matters is how many times we put it in the net. I do want to quickly ask how you think you'll set up in terms of formation. Again, I've just quickly got your previous lineup on screen. You went with a 3-5-2. Is that how Bloomfield tends to set his teams up?
Yeah, he did try 4-5-1. He did try having one striker up top and flooding the midfield a little bit more. But I think that given the players that were available, I think that obviously he's inherited the squad in large part. So he understands that squad has largely been collated with a view to playing that 3-5-2. And again, that was a real source of frustration when we were under Rob Edwards, because it felt like there was a complete lack of adaptability from Rob Edwards. He was absolutely married to that particular formation. Even when you're chasing the game, it was, no, we're playing 3-5-2. Whereas, like I say, Matt Bloomfield does try and change it up a little bit, and he'll make earlier changes as well. That was another frustration with Rob Edwards. We were finding that he was deliberating with his backroom staff until like the 85th minute. When you're a goal or two down, you're thinking, make a change now, be proactive, do something. And I feel like Matt Bloomfield does do that. He doesn't linger. He gives those that are coming on time to sort of get up to speed with the game and potentially affect it. So I think you're right. I think it will be a 3-5-2. Like I say, the only real changes I can foresee would be that back line. I think that if McGuinness is in there, he might come back in for Makoso. And like I said, that's just that's not that he's done anything wrong in the last game. Like I said, he put in a near man of the match performance, but I just think that McGuinness's experience and sort of stature within the squad will probably mean that he'll be at the back there alongside Bell and Cal Naismith. So I think that Jacob Brown will probably be the second striker. I think it will be Morris and Brown again rather than Adebayo or Nordas. Nordas is a player that we bought in January, and we say about like debates within the fan base, Joe, and I've not given him much credit. I think that when someone hits the eye wrong. As someone that, like you said, you've followed football for God knows how many years, like a good footballer when you see one, and sometimes people just don't hit the eye correctly, and he's one of them. So as much as he's a new face, and you know what football fans are like, they want to see the new players, they want to see the new guy. I'm hoping that Jacob Brown will get the nod and partner Morris up front.
Yep, no, that's fair enough. Let's move on to predictions then, mate. Normally I just ask for score predictions, but it's getting towards the business end of the season, so I've got 2 or 3. First of all, the current league table is, I don't have it on my screen anymore, but I'm pretty certain you were third bottom, 5 points away. Sorry for bringing it up.
That's correct.
No, third bottom, third bottom, 5 points away from Cardiff City. Do you think you get out of it? Do you think you stay up, or do you think it's League One for you next season?
I hate to admit it, but I think it's League One at this stage. And as much as there was a lot of hope that was pinged on that 3 points that we got at Pompey, I just feel like I look at our fixtures and I don't feel like there's enough leeway for us to have a 2-game swing from the likes of Cardiff and Stoke and Hull. We've got to play Cardiff and Hull, but they're both away from home. But we've also got the likes of yourselves to play. We've got to play Leeds at our place, and we're playing Leeds at a pretty difficult time in the season. So it's a few weeks' time yet, and I'm sure that you'll be watching with keen eyes to see if we can perform some sort of miracle. But that's going to be that like real crux point time where it could be the sort of difference between them getting an actual promotion spot rather than anything else. So we've just got some difficult fixtures, and ultimately the stats don't lie. Like I think that I was on a show last week and we were talking about I think the amount of games we've played since the game against Brighton in the Premier League, right? And I know that I'm stretching your memory a bit, but at Kenilworth Road we turned over Brighton 4-0. Best performance I've arguably ever seen in person from a Luton Town team. And since then, I think we've won 9 games in total. And we've lost 34, I think it is, of those 54. And to think that we're now 11 games away from the end of the season, we're going to be expected to win 4, 5, 6 games. The ratios just don't stack up. I just don't see the playing style and the playing performances that warrant me having a bit more hope than that. And it pains me to say that. It won't change the fact that I'll go to Luton every week. We've been in worse positions. And it's one of those things where, as a Luton Town fan, you are used to being on a roller coaster. Very, very rarely is a league season where we're not doing anything. Very rarely is that the case. It's either a relegation battle, being relegated, or going up. It's usually one or the other, but sadly I think that we'll come up short, unfortunately.
To be honest with you, mate, I tend to agree. I have got the league table back up now, and I remember about 2, 3, maybe even 4 weeks ago, I predict when just after John Eustace had gone in at Derby, I predicted it'd be Plymouth, yourselves, and Cardiff. Now, obviously, Eustace has done nothing. They do play Blackburn this week, and then obviously he'll be very up for it. So maybe a lot is hanging on that game for them, and if they get a win, maybe they'll kick on. But I'm just looking at that bottom 3 now and thinking it's probably going to be that 3. I think, like you say, you need too big of a swing. My next question is the top 2. Who do you think finishes in the top 2? Just because we've got a keen eye on it, obviously. Currently Leeds on 76 points, then Sheffield United on 73, Burnley on 71, and Sunderland on 65. I personally think Sunderland are out of it now. and I think Leeds are in it. They will 100% win the league, in my opinion. It's just between us and Sheffield United. Who do you think gets that final spot? If of course, you agree with me that Leeds will win it.
Yeah, I do. I'll be honest with you. For those that are interested, I'm going to have a little plug here. But I did put a video up last week on OK Football Show on YouTube about the reasons why I think that Leeds will win the league. I think that win over Sheffield United that they got last Monday night was the one, really. I think that they drew against yourselves, they beat Sunderland, and then they beat Sheffield United. And I think that to me was the sign of champions, beating those ones that are around you. When you look at their fixture list, Leeds, I mean, it's a bit of a dream.
They've got the easiest one of the top four, in my opinion.
By quite some distance, in my opinion. I tend to agree with you. I don't think Sunderland will have enough. I think that they'll plateau into fourth place, and that for them, they just need to make sure that above all else they carry some level of form into the playoffs. Because I think if you look at teams that have nailed a place way before the end of the season, quite a lot of the time they can flake at the first hurdle in the playoffs. So I really do think that they need to make sure that they make a concerted effort to keep winning and putting that pressure on yourselves and Sheffield United. The next question, obviously, yourselves or Sheffield United. I think you've got two very, very different sides there. You've got yourselves who, like we've discussed a number of times, you don't concede, pragmatic style of play. But look at where you are. You like I say, you're over 2 points a game, which is not to be sniffed at in the Championship. Like I say, if you can get it nailed, like you said about the fact that your form has picked up, you've scored 6 goals in the last two games, and if you can take that forward, and even you don't need to score many. Let's be honest. Like I say, you've got such a solid foundation. Whereas I feel like Sheffield United, they potentially have a few more exciting players. I'll be honest with you. They've got the likes of O'Hare. They've got the likes of Gus Harmer. They've got a couple of players that I really like. Raksaki. I really like watching him. I think that he's a fantastic footballer. But I see Sheffield United as more fallible than you. And again, that comes from seeing them recently. I wasn't impressed by the way that they played against us. I thought that they were absolutely gettable. Their argument would be that they rested a few players before their big game a few days after against Leeds. But I just feel like you've got another gear potentially. And I think that we mentioned earlier on about the importance of Marcus Edwards and how much of a skillful player and that he could be in terms of unlocking teams. And I don't know. I'll probably get accused of being a bit of a brown nose to anyone that does listen that isn't a Burnley fan. But I've waxed lyrical about Scott Parker earlier on in the season. I just think he knows how to get it done, and Chris Wilder does as well, which is obviously is why it's such a tight debate. But I just fancy Burnley. I think it'll be Leeds, Burnley, Sheffield United, Sunderland, and then the pack after that is a big one. But I probably see it pretty much as it is now, barring a huge amount of backdoor entries. I would say, like I say, Coventry's form is remarkable.
Yeah, Coventry will get in there 100%.
Yeah, and then like I say, I think that probably out of those other teams that are chasing, the most consistent is West Brom. So that'd be my lineup.
Yeah, fair enough. Obviously, we'll take that. We need to make sure we don't let the 0-0s creep back in. Obviously, I did put a few posts up before the Cardiff game and said anything less than 6 points out of Cardiff and Luton, and then we don't deserve to go up. And we need to back the win up against Cardiff now against you guys before a tough game at home to West Brom. But again, if we can get another 3 points there, then who knows? But we just need to keep winning games. And we do play Sheffield United at home as well, and that game is massive. It really is. I think a lot will rest on that. Final one from me, mate. Predictions for the match. Score predictions, please, mate.
Yes, so I mentioned it earlier on about like it's rare as hen's teeth getting a goal against you guys. So I'm particularly worried about it, and I'll be honest, I've gone for a 2-0 Burnley victory. I just don't see us having enough threat on the road to be able to trouble you. And desperation is one thing, and I know that it's difficult sometimes playing against teams that are struggling at the bottom, that are fighting for their lives. But I think you'll have enough. to get it over the line with the players and the quality that you've got available, especially the bench as well. Like the fact that you can bring on the likes of Kolyosho, and you can bring on some players that can just twist and turn their way through the sort of the wing backs and the defense.
Yeah.
I just feel like you'll have enough, and it pains me to sort of say that, because, like I say, it'll be another nail in our coffin. But the reality of it is that I think that you'll have far too much quality for us at Turf Moor, and yeah, I'm going to stick with a 2-0 win.
Yeah, I agree with you. I do think 2-0. I think even if you guys come here and shut up shop like the likes of Derby, Preston, QPR, and all the other teams, Stoke City that we drew 0-0 against, that we shouldn't be drawing 0-0 against. If two of them games are turned into 1-0 wins at the very minimum, when there's 10 of them, I think there is now, then we're in the second position by 2 points, or just 1 point behind Leeds, I think it is. But I think now the difference is we have Marcus Edwards, and he can be the key to unlock these defences. I know I said it on your show, but I'll just repeat it for those who will only watch this one. But we should have been 1-0 down at half-time against Sheffield Wednesday. The reason why we were 1-0 up, in fact, should have been more than 1-0 down, but the reason why we were 1-0 up was because Marcus Edwards had a bit of quality to be able to put it in the back of the net, and I do think that's the difference now. I think it's interesting. I do think that we'll get it over the line. I agree with that. I'm one of the few Burnley fans that's in a position now that does think that we will go on to get second. I think there's a lot of negativity surrounding it, so it's very interesting with that one. But fingers crossed I'm right, because I cannot be arsed with the playoffs. I really can't. But Phil, actually, there is one more thing from me before we wrap it up. Do you want to let everyone know where they can find you and the OK Football Show?
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, mate. Yeah. So we're obviously quite new in terms of our YouTube channel. That's mainly where we're at now. So you can find us if you search for OK Football Show on YouTube. We are still on X or Twitter, but we're using it less and less because it's run by a madman. So we're trying to go a bit more onto YouTube. So that's where you can find us for Luton content, but as well as that, we do quite a lot of Championship content as well. So you can see us recording on a Sunday morning at the Bricklayers Arms, which is a pub in Luton, where we talk about the Championship. And like I say, we talk about every single team every single week. So if you fancy a little bit of a watch from a neutral perspective and seeing how people are looking at Burnley, then give us a follow.
Yeah, definitely recommend that. Even though you do have Ollie Kay on there, unfortunately, some of the Burnley fans will remember Ollie from the Premier League season and even the Championship season, coming on podcast, putting clips out of him, being very, very arrogant. And these clips always come back to bite him on the arse, but he doesn't care. And that's the beauty of Ollie. I've only just realised the OK part of the OK Football Show, will probably stand for Ollie Kay, won't it? What a narcissist! What a narcissist!
Yes, but he's a budding Benjamin Bloom, isn't he? That's what he likes to think.
He really is. He really is. But mate, thank you for coming on the show. It's a pleasure, especially this late on a Thursday night. I just want to mention one more thing, by the way. We do have YouTube channel members. And I just want to apologise to them. The YouTube channel members, I normally put this out before for them so they get early release. But with it being recorded on Thursday night, I'm not going to get chance, guys. So I do apologise for that. The next one for West Brom will hopefully be early for you guys. But again, it's another quick turnaround, so we'll see. But it will be back as soon as possible. So I do apologise for that. But Phil, thank you for coming on the show. Good luck for the rest of the season, apart from, of course, Saturday. But genuinely, I hope you manage to stay up.
Thank you, mate. I appreciate it. Not a problem. Like I say, anytime you want to speak to a League One fan, then let me know.
Cheers, mate. I'll be in touch next season then.